As for what's been happening in the trial today, on the start of the third week, we began the day with the jury being shown two very short extracts from the Edge of the City programme about paedophile racist grooming by young Muslims of white girls in Keighley. We'd have liked to have shown the jury the whole thing, but for the simple reason that it didn't actually appear until after we made the speeches where we referred to what was going to be in it, it wasn't legally acceptable. But we were able to show little extracts because the prosecution have made a great deal, or were trying to make a great deal of the fact that at one point in my speech I used the phrase "packy street thugs," and they tried to tell the jury that I was referring to all Asians as packies, and they tried to say that this obviously involves inciting hatred or feeling hatred. And the way in which that phrase was used in several points in this documentary made it very clear that's not the case. And as every normal person in huge parts of the country, certainly all across northern England, knows, the phrase "packy" is a simple description that's used by Pakistanis, it's used by their community, it's used by white people. Go round the packy shop, get a pint of milk. There's nothing derogatory about it. Furthermore, I was using it about a specific type of aggressive young Muslim who struts the streets. As I told the court the other day, you see hundreds of them in this courtroom every single year, because you do. Everyone in Keighley knows the type I was talking about, and they know perfectly well it's not indicative of some kind of hatred either in me or the audience. It's not a word that I use to describe Muslims or Pakistanis, but "packy street thug" sums up the type that I was talking about, who might attack people if they stood up for the BNP. And watching this Edge of the City programme when we were trying to decide whether it should be shown to the jury in its entirety to tell them what was going on in the paedophile scandals, made it very clear to us and to the lawyers that, oh, wait a minute, that what the upper class lawyers down in London think about this word isn't what ordinary people do. So we showed them that, and then straight after that went into the final speeches by the main barristers. The prosecution barrister was on first. He went on and on and on. Some people in the public gallery literally fell asleep. Some of the jurors were almost nodding off, I'm pleased to say. Very boring, primarily because he's trying to make some kind of case out of something which is utterly threadbare, and he knows it. So there was a lot of deceit, a lot of twisting what we'd said, a lot of putting words into our mouths, a lot of taking things out of context, as he tried to make some kind of case for the prosecution out of what the jury have seen and heard. And it was poor, superficially I suppose. If it was all you saw, if you could stay awake, it was quite convincing. But it's not all that they're going to see, because after him came the first part of Mark's barrister's closing speech for the defence. Mr Lawson-Rogers, QC, spoke, I suppose, for about 25 minutes. A very powerful, passionate advocacy of freedom of speech. He went straight to quoting Voltaire about, "I may disagree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it." A brilliant quote from George Orwell. He said that the jury should look at the way in which the trial came about just at the start of a general election, and he said what you've got here is the Labour government, a Labour Attorney General, trying to use the law to muzzle political opponents from making political speeches in the course of an election campaign. And he said this is very important. It's the first time it's been done, and if it goes ahead, if it's allowed to happen, then it's a very, very serious attack on our entire democratic system. He didn't pull any punches at all. I wondered at one stage if the judge might stop him, because it's very heavily political. But that's what he said. He said it in a very lively, powerful voice, which kept the jury awake. That took us up to the break. One of the jury members had to leave early. The courts are quite flexible with these things, actually, so one jury member's got an appointment, had to leave early, so that's it. So tomorrow morning, the third Tuesday of the whole trial, we start with Lawson-Rogers for Mark Collett closing his defence statement. Then after that they'll move to Tim King QC, who's my, I think, brilliant main barrister. He's fantastic, got a wonderful brain, and also he's very powerful, very passionate. He'll be giving the closing speech for me. After that we then move on to the judge's summing up, which is quite likely now to start tomorrow afternoon but not finish until Wednesday morning sometime. What we're looking at now is the jury going out to consider their verdict sometime on Wednesday. With a case like this and so many charges to look at, we think it's quite likely now it'll go on till Thursday before we get a verdict. Certainly no verdict before Wednesday now, that's clear. So it's dragging on towards the end of the third week. What the jury's going to do is anybody's guess. There's indications from how some of them look that there's several of them could well be on our side, several of them could well be against us, just for the political reasons, nothing to do with what we've said. That's just the way that they feel anyway. That's the way this case was always going to be. So there's strong indications, as far as you can get anything, that we're likely to end up with a hung jury. That's a jury that just can't decide to agree. If that's the case, then it collapses. That's the end of this trial. The Crown Prosecution Service have then got the awful problem. Do they let us off and then we've won, or do they re-prosecute, and to millions of people in this country it becomes crystal clear what this is? This ultra fanatically pro-multicultural and viciously anti-British and left-wing Labour government abusing its position at the head of the legal system in this country to persecute its political opponents for telling the truth. Well, if they want to take us to court again and put that into people's heads, we don't look forward to it, but we'll be there, and I know that you will be as well. Thank you very much.